Today we're going to crawl back into the trenches as I continue my hand-sculpted diorama for my Warhound Titan's base. This is a once-in-a-lifetime model and a once-in-a-lifetime project for me, and I'm so excited to be able to lavish all of the attention and detail on it that I want to. Because 2 weeks ago I put out a video where I embarked on the journey of basing my Titan. I decided I wasn't going to cut any corners and I was going to take my time with it, and at the end of that video I asked all of you if you'd like to see the whole process, including all of the finicky details, or if I should just skip ahead and start painting the Titan. And not only did that video perform really well, but not a single comment said to skip forward. We had hundreds of comments, and the two top like comments amassing over 800 likes saying, "Dave, give us everything." So we're continuing the journey today, and we've got explosions, we've got soaring into a tank with power tools, and we've got fastidiously hand sculpting hundreds of sandbags. Let's do it. Murray spent a day fixing that cabinet, which, if you hadn't noticed, the glass shelf had smashed and collapsed, and I'm really glad he did. Now, I'd love to use it as a backdrop, but it's kind of always out of focus and weird. But hey, our minis are on display, and that's great. It's time to start talking about making this Titan and doing it with more headroom. So where do you pick up with a project like this? Well, it begins with me clipping all the uprights, basically appraising what I've done, trimming those verticals down, and then repeating a bunch of steps that were in the previous video. Now, there was a great suggestion in the last video that I should make a playlist for this and put it in the description, and well, done. It's in the description. So if you want to go check out that video, go check it out. It goes over the base process for me producing the trenches. The very quick rundown of that is that I trim and carve down planks of balsa wood with a knife and a sculpting tool. I use some plasticard that represents corrugated sheet, and I glue them along the walls, and then I create duck boards along the trenches. Now, despite this being a repeat step, there is a very important point of interest on this section of wall, and that is where the back of the Titanic foot is crumbling the edge of the trench. It's really important to me that I create a sense of weight in this project. And to do that, I need to create the sense that the pressure of the Titan's foot is forcing the earth to break down that trench barricade. So after hand carving up a bunch of these planks, I snap them all in half and then glue them bending and heaving outwards from the wall. I can then fill the gap that's left in the wall by using liberal amounts of a thick putty, in this case the Bear Cavalry Paints trench putty they made for Trench Crusade, and I can add that behind all the planks, which not only secures them in place when it sets, but it also creates the sense that it is tumbling through them. To add to that sense of gravity, I add more texture paste to the ground directly beneath, and then I use the water's properties to effectively flow the texture pigment, causing it to spread out in a really natural way and make it look like it's fallen from above. This is the first of many storytelling moments in the trench that elevate it from a sculpture of a trench to a diorama of a moment captured in time. The next thing to do would be to hand sculpt more sandbags. I did mention I'd be sculpting hundreds of sandbags in this video, right? Now, it could be argued that I could 3D print some of these, but I found working with 3D printed sandbags more frustrating than not. Sandbags are something that I want to organically be able to move around in different locations, as well as glue them onto uneven surfaces. And that repeated tile set vibe of printing a bunch of sandbags and gluing them on, I think will become apparent when you're working with hundreds of them. So I'm going for the hand sculpted approach. I've been itching to glue the tank onto the board, but I realized pretty quickly that if I was to glue the tank onto the board, it would make sculpting the inside parts of the trenches an absolute nightmare. That's why where I started in this video is building out those trenches and finishing the detailing of them. I've gotten my flow with sculpting sandbags on the first wall in the trench there, and now it's time to move to the one that has a bit of a crater blown into it. This was the gap next to the command bunker, and here I repeat the pattern I'd done previously, just sculpting them out almost a brickwork texture. Now, this first layer of sandbags ends really abruptly, creating a nice V shape, and that's because I'm going to come back and do some more sculpting once it's dried. Now, every time I'm mixing up putty, I'm often ending up with a little bit more left over, and I can use this to sculpt some extra sandbags and just place them around the tops of the trenches. And one of the fantastic things about stretching this project out and doing multiple videos is I can take on your feedback. And some of you have some really fantastic ideas. Thomas O'Hanlon 1060 in the comments suggested that I should use some of the canvas material I used to make the bedding in the dugouts and basically press it on top of the sandbags to introduce some texture to them. I attempted this and the effect looks great. So from now on in this trench, I continue that process. And ultimately, I do think it elevates the piece. So thanks for the tip. And with so much sandbagging taking place, we can take a breath, relax, and watch the process. I wanted to update everyone on the Sisters of the Old Blood campaign. Just quickly, I wanted to show off some of the awesome concept art Alicia has been developing while Patrick has been finishing up the models ready to release. And lastly, I wanted to announce to everyone that late backing is now open. So if you missed out or you were waiting to see what stretch goals would be revealed and what cool concept art would be developed for units that are yet to come, now is your opportunity. Late backing will only be running for about a month, just over a month, and after that it'll be closed, and you will not be able to get these models or this campaign for quite a long time. If you want the Sisters, this is your way to do it, and also if you want the Kindred, you can add them as an add-on for this. Supporting the Sisters directly supports Tabletop time and our work and continuing to make cool stuff like this, so we'd really appreciate it. Links are in the description for that late backing. Now let's get back to the Titan. Isn't it relaxing to be able to take our time with these things? Not only the sculpting, but also the watching. Well, it's time to take this project to another area that needs some attention. That command bunker at the front, I hadn't detailed the insides of it. And when you're looking at it from multiple angles, it's gonna be pretty obvious it's not done. So I carved some balsa planks to create lining for the left and right walls, and also some floor paneling coming up. Now, rather than the rough hewn single planks of the duckboards here, I went for a sheet of planks more similar to the walls, figuring that the command bunker sat there for longer and has a bit more time put into its construction. But with that plank coming out of the bunker, I wasn't entirely sure how to seamlessly connect it to the duckboard path. It was noticeably more sunk into the ground. And then I had a flashback to my days volunteering for the SES, which is the Australian State Emergency Service. And in heavy rains or floods, we had to sandbag buildings to prevent water getting in. So I decided to make a little ring of sandbags at the entrance that soldiers would have to step over, but would help to prevent the command bunker from flooding. It's these moments of intentional storytelling that I think make dioramas come to life. It would have been easy for me to just put some more duckboards or a little plank or a ramp down into the command bunker, but I think by adding these sandbags, it makes you question why they're there. Thinking about the reason tells you the story. Obviously, they don't want their command bunker to flood. And as someone for whom modeling is a huge part of the joy they get out of the hobby, telling these stories visually is one of my favorite parts of the process. Next up, we move on to the back foot of the Titan. It's landed heavily on the edge of the trench, and as it is lifting up, the front toe has dragged across the ground. I'd already done the base foundation of strewn about sandbags, so I added another layer, just hand sculpting sandbags and making it look like this wall had been completely collapsed and destroyed by the Titan's foot. You sort of get the sense that perhaps it had held together when the Titan had stepped, but it's really when it's lifted back off that all the sandbags have slid down. The slope was too vertical, and I was happy with the way I'd sculpted the sandbags, but the way I'd been sculpting them wasn't really matching the gradient of the slope. So I grabbed out a rotary tool and got a little grinding bit and just took off all the extra material on the edge of that original filament printed base. And I did this to create a much gentler gradient, and once this was done, sculpted more sandbags, making sure to include a couple that had been torn and dragged by the Titan's toe as it moved backwards. I have to give real kudos to this Tamiya epoxy putty quick type that I've been using. For me, it sits perfectly between Milliput and green stuff in its properties. It's easier to sculpt than green stuff, but holds its detail better than Milliput, and it dries sort of touch dry within a couple of hours, so while you still need to be careful, you can sculpt on top of it much quicker than green stuff. So overall, while obviously green stuff is good for some fine detail sculpting, I think for me this is replacing pretty much every putty as my general purpose putty. And speaking of putty, you know what we're moving back to? Sculpting more sandbags. Because that sandbag wall next to the command bunker has set enough for me to actually detail it out, I blend some gobs of putty into the edge of that wall where it terminated in a sharp line and begin to sculpt individual bags of sand as they're being pushed out from the wall. The weight of the bags on top of them are pinching them in place, but the pressure of the dirt trying to push through the weakened point where the explosion has damaged the upright is also nudging those bags out into the trench. This push from two directions creates some tension, and I need to sculpt that in the sandbags to tell that narrative. Once these are sculpted, I lump a loose sandbag on top of that broken upright, and I think you can really start to see the effect working. These kinds of things are super worth time invested. It would have been easy to terminate these in a straight line and then hide that gap with some dirt texture paints later, but by taking the time to sculpt the individual bags pushing out from the wall, I think we've created a much more realistic image. With these done, I can extend the wall up, laying individual bags along the top. And I'm going to do this all the way around the trenches. These extra sandbags are basically holding back the topsoil, and another attempt to keep the rain that would settle up the top from getting into the trenches. I can then mirror out the sandbags I put on one side of the command bunker to make it look a bunch more even and hide the seam where that corrugated sheet of plastic card is sitting. Now there's a big job, and you'll never guess what it is. It's making an absolute buttload more sandbags. And while some of you might think this is tedious, it's actually really cathartic. It's a fun process to do repetitively. I've been listening to some great podcasts while I've been doing it. As I'm positioning sandbags around where the tank will live, I make sure to dry fit it a bunch of times. And then in the areas where the tank is right next to and butted up to sandbags, I make sure to sculpt them nudged out and pushing out towards the edges. With previous putty dried, I add a final layer of sandbags on top of the command bunker, and for now, I can call that part of the board done. Next up, I need to add some weight to that collapsed dugout. Any areas where I was quick or lazy and didn't sculpt timber, I cover up with lots of texture putty. And then I also make sure to fill a bunch of the surfaces in the dugout with big clumps of texture paste. And the reason for this is I want to hide any area where the soldier's limbs would be, because of course this wasn't a full model of a soldier, it was just some arms and some putty and a head. Now, aside from the soil on the top surface, I feel like this dugout is complete, and it looks so much more horrifying and traumatic as you can see the weight of all the earthworks falling upon him. Now, you might notice how when I'm working on these, I'm balling up my putty. What am I doing this for? Well, it's to try and ensure that I have a roughly uniform size for each of the sandbags. If I make all of these balls of putty before I squish out the sandbags, I'm working with the same amount of material for each bag. So ideally, they'll all end up pretty much the same size. And with these balls, I can create a second row of sandbags along the front where the tank will be butted up against. This particular part of the trenches has an extra couple of rows of sandbags, and this is to protect the front glacis of the tank from being hit by ricochets or rounds in its less protected surfaces. The tank hasn't been there for long, so it's not properly dug in. However, I did want to show that the soldiers had made some effort to improve its defensive position. Here it's more sandbags, more storytelling, more toppled bags thrown into the trenches where the earthworks have crumbled and collapsed, and some where the tank's violent destruction by the plasma blast gun will have knocked them off the ledge and off the stack into the trench as well. Now, I bet you're all thankful for this. This is the last time I'm going to mention sandbags in this video as I sculpt one final torn open sandbag in a crater towards the front. Now I can move to some more of your feedback. The Mr. Podge and Entropy 2100 both mentioned that the tank was too level and that it should have thrown some tracks. And I agree. Within reason, I'm going to address this. There are two major things. One, despite the narrative of this trench containing so many methods to prevent water getting in, it's pretty clear that this trench can get horribly muddy. It's also kind of a forced point that it currently isn't particularly wet. And the reason for that is the amount that the Titan is squishing the earth. If this was a mud slurry, it would have pushed way more heavily into the soil. So I'm imagining this is kind of the drier months of the year, but the trench emplacement has been there for a long time. I think with hindsight, I probably would have sunk the Titan a bit deeper than I did, but hindsight is 2020, so we're going with that more solid ground theory. That means the tank itself can't really be more embedded in the soil than the Titan, because the Titan's gonna weigh so much more than the tank. So rather than focusing on how dug into the mud it would be, I'm focusing on how the plasma blast gun shot would have shaken it up and dislodged it. And that same shot would have made it throw some tracks. The other problem with the tracks is if I remove them, it's going to leave these massive gaping holes, and I can't really show the bottom side of tracks because they're not sculpted to have a lower side, so it will look like pretty obvious bits of a plastic kit. I'm going to address both at the same time in a limited way. Grabbing my rotary tool to carve even more off this tank. I shave off the left side of the treads to create a slightly uneven kilter for the vehicle, taking care to not take off too much material at a time, because once I've taken it off, it's a lot harder to put it back on. I also break just the back tracks and I glue them back on so they're hanging loosely. But I do think just by breaking these a little bit, it does actually really help to sell the narrative. With one side of the treads carved down, the tank now sits at a slight angle pushing forward and to the left, and I do think this was a great suggestion and I'm glad I've done it. Still messing with the tank, Quackenstein and Zoom Boom both commented that the tank commander's arm should be grasping desperately for the sky, and again, I agree, I think that's a really cool idea. Now that the melted plastic fumes have abated, I can glue on some arms to the tank commander, and I'm just gonna shave down one of these heavy weapon arms holding a control handle. There's no like Apocalypse Now hand reaching for the sky, but given that he's heavily burnt, I think sort of a desperate fist reaching up is just as good. And finally, I can seat the tank in the diorama. I had a mix of the really thick texture paste from Bear Cavalry I've been using, and also some Viejo texture paste that's a lot thinner. Combining the two in areas so I can have a bit of variance in the texture, and also mixing some water in and mushing down that thick texture paste to make it blend into the two. I also add some small fake rocks in areas to help the soil look a bit more realistic, especially focusing around that old crater behind the tank where I imagine a shell has landed and it's probably dislodged some larger chunks of clay or stone. Now I can glue the tank onto some base with some super glue and use more of that putty to blend in the edges of the tracks so it looks like it's been sitting here for a little while. This feels like a huge step in the project. And it's also where I need to end the video this week. Let's check out the progress I've made in this video, and then after that I'm going to talk in the outro about all of the stuff that's coming in the third and final installment of my Basing a Titan series, which will be next week. Thank you to all of our amazing patrons who continue to support the channel. And one of our perks for joining is when you join our Patreon, we shout you out in a video. So I'd like to thank the patrons that have joined in the last month. And those are Bryce Bits, JH, Skinny Man, Shadow Wolf, welcome back, CCM Car, Lee Enfield, Arturia, Jambles, Gbung02, Remicus 101, Dice Car, Tristan Joyce Velez, and Justin Hunter. Welcome to the gang, everyone. This has been such a joyous experience getting to work on this. I don't feel like I've ever been given the license to take my time on a project as much as this. I know how much work I've been putting into this, and I really think it's worth it. So one more time, thank you to everyone who has given the vote of confidence and wants to see the journey. And the good news is I'm not going to drag this out forever. Those who are on board for this series, guess what? The next video is next week's video, because I'm going to finish the basing and then we can, give it a few weeks off, and then I'll come back and start painting the Titan and everything. I feel like we've made some amazing progress and we're poised for the home run on this base. I really want to build it up over multiple layers, and that's going to have setting time, as well as include, especially in the front part of the trench, some barbed wire, tank traps, and then the most important thing for me is adding the human element, because all of this is the foundation. I need to put bodies in these trenches. I want to have a cowering guardsman, one survivor who's still alive. I want to add ammo boxes, discarded las rifles, all of the war material that will make this go from feeling like a snapshot of a location into a lived-in diorama. And as I've addressed so many comments and talked about your involvement in the video, I do want to address a couple more. One of them was suggestions that I should put fire on the tank, and I'm going to basically address that by saying I'm not going to do it. And there's two major reasons for this. One, I actually prefer the idea of the tank just sort of oozing and dripping, and I'm going to paint some light OSL glow effects of molten glowing red steel that's just melting and dripping down. But the more important reason is actually one of the purpose of this base. I want this base to be something you explore once you've already been wowed by the paint job. You look at this and go, whoa, a Warhound Titan, and then you kind of glance down and go, oh my God, that base is awesome. And the second point is on troops assaulting the trenches. This one I was a little bit conflicted by. Do I have an Alpha Legion operative smugly sitting there sharpening a knife? Or another thought was to have some aggressive Trader Guardsmen, maybe World Eater Jackals or Falgor Beastmen. The last option was maybe some Dark Mechanicus Thralls. And all of these decisions have come back to me saying, no, none of them. And the reason is pretty simple. Warhounds are scout titans. They're line breakers. So while I do think it would be perfectly sensible for this Warhound to be accompanied by other fast-moving line breaking forces, it immediately places it as part of a wider army rather than it being its own thing. The Titan is the champion of this story and the destruction it has reigned, so I'm gonna keep it simple there and I'm gonna focus on that. I hope that makes sense. That's why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it. But I did really appreciate the suggestions, and they really made me think about why I was making my decisions, which is always valuable. So that's the end of the video. Next week, we have the finale of me building this awesome Titan base, where we're gonna have a lot of death and destruction. And it's kind of the part I've really been looking forward to. So once again, thank you for watching. If you want to support what we do, please check out the links in the description, either the Patreon or the late backing for the sisters. Both of those would be a huge boost and much appreciated. Have a great week, everyone. See you next week.